Hi, in this video I will show you how to create a seamless snakeskin texture that will look good in both image and animation renders. First, we need to create a square image plane. Make sure it is in the center of the coordinates for accuracy. Lock the layer so you don't accidentally move it. To make the scales look more realistic, you can use a photo of a real snake skin. I am using the example of a texture I made earlier, but you can take any picture of snake scales you like, where there is a top view. Here I divided the square in half to better see the center of the texture so that it would look symmetrical later. Let's create another plane. We will make a scale from it. Let's begin modeling the first scale. It's worth doing this carefully, since we'll be copying it. To give a shape to the scale, I will temporarily go to the sculpting mode. Now let's copy the finished scale and place it on top in the middle. Adjust its size and then copy it again, placing the scales in a vertical row at the center of the image plane. You don't have to make a big area, as we can just copy a ready-made piece of scales. Then we copy the finished row of scales and repeat this process several times, arranging them in a more natural look. Switch back to sculpting mode and make changes so that the scales are slightly different from each other. Now let's move on to the side scale. We give it the desired shape and do the same copying process. And finally, we create the side parts using the new image plane. Select a specific area as shown. We will move it a bit later. We need to make a copy of this and then merge it into one object. On the image plane, select the upper left corner point and move the 3D cursor to this point. Now select the object we just made and move the center of its coordinates to the 3D cursor. We need to move the object downward according to exact coordinates so that the edges of the future texture seamlessly converge both at the top and bottom. Then we remove all that is unnecessary, leaving only the top row. You can carefully make changes without touching the edge lines of the texture at the top and bottom of it, since in these places the texture should be identical. Now we select the entire top part of the scales, merge into one object and copy it. After that, we move everything down, placing it correctly and removing excess scales. Make sure there are no empty spaces anywhere. If there are, fill them by copying one of the scales. Select both parts except the middle row and merge them into one object. Here I did extra work by selecting everything. When we have the object selected, except for the middle row, we move the center of the object to the center of our scene, or cursor to world origin. Now we add mirror modifier. Then we need to apply the mirror modifier to be able to make changes to the object. I noticed that one scale is missing from the bottom row, so I'll copy and move it from the top row, since those two rows shouldn't be different, as mentioned earlier. Merge all into one object, including the middle row. Here I bring and set up the camera to render the displacement texture. The camera should be in the center of our scene coordinates. Make sure your camera settings are the same as mine. Move the camera up, placing it above the object. Change the camera settings to the texture size you need. To adjust the camera evenly along the edges of our background texture, it is more convenient to temporarily disable the 3D model of scales. Turn on the scales back and move on to baking the displacement texture itself. Here I import the displacement map baking material I made earlier. It is easily done using nodes and looks like this. But if you want to use mine, you can download it by following the link in the description. Adjusting the baking depth. I recommend maintaining a balance in the transitions of white to black for greater detail. Now let's render and see what the finished texture looks like. Check if the texture looks correct. If your scales are symmetrical, the texture will be seamless. I will show how you can use this texture by adding it, for example, onto a cylindrical object. By slightly stretching the cylinder, we will give the texture a more natural look. You can add more geometry to the object for a better displacement effect. Using Array modifier, we will copy the object and give it a snake-like shape. Now I'm going to connect the array to a curve so that I can change the shape of the object. If you are interested, you can take a look at my snakeskin textures, as well as images and animations where I used a similar texture, following the link in the description. I hope this was useful. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.